I had never thought my own son would make me feel like an uninvited guest in his life. But that's exactly what happened the morning I stood on his doorstep in New York City. My hands were trembling from the chill in the February air, but the cold in my chest had nothing to do with the weather. There it was. A note taped right to the door, in bold black ink. Honeymoon. Do not disturb. I blinked at it, my stomach twisting. Honeymoon? But I hadn't even been told there was a wedding. My son, my only son, had gotten married, and I hadn't even known. I reached for the doorknob, hoping maybe this was some kind of joke, maybe a leftover sign from a prank. But the door didn't budge. It was locked. Behind that door was a celebration I had been deliberately kept out of. I lifted my hand and knocked, the sound sharp against the wood. My heart thudded louder than the knocks. A few moments later, I heard footsteps. Then the door creaked open, and there she was, my new daughter-in-law. A young brunette woman with flawless makeup and a silk robe tied loosely at her waist. She looked at me like I was the last person on earth she wanted to see. "Mrs. Patterson," she said coolly, her voice dipped in sugar but sharp enough to cut. "What are you doing here?" I swallowed hard, searching for words. What am I doing here? What do you mean? Why wasn't I told? Why wasn't I at my son's wedding? Her lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Because the ceremony was for the most important people. I'm sure you understand. The words stung like fire across my chest. My knees wobbled, but I gripped the railing by the door to steady myself. The most important people? I had raised my son. I had been there for every scraped knee, every graduation, every heartbreak. And yet, somehow, I didn't make the cut. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But I didn't either. I stood there, watching this young woman, this stranger, smirk as if I was nothing more than an inconvenience. At that moment, something shifted inside me. I might have been an 83-year-old grandmother with thinning blonde hair and hands marked by years of hard work, but I was far from powerless. She thought I was weak. She thought I was irrelevant. She thought wrong. Because if they thought they could humiliate me, they had no idea what I was still capable of. And that's when I made the decision, the one that would drive them absolutely crazy just hours later. I would freeze their bank account. My name was still tied to it after all. My late husband had made sure of that when he passed. They didn't know, but I did. And now, I intended to use it. I glanced back at my daughter-in-law, who was still standing smugly at the door, confident she had shut me out of their little paradise. I didn't say another word. Instead, I turned and walked away slowly, my cane tapping against the floor of the hallway. Every step I took burned with humiliation, but also with resolve. They had drawn the battle line, and I was ready to cross it. But little did I know, the moment I froze their account, the situation would spiral into chaos I could barely imagine. Because within a few hours, my phone would start ringing nonstop, my son screaming on the other end, begging me to undo what I had done. And I was just getting started. I still remember the sound of the plane wheels touching down in New York. My heart was beating faster than it had in years, almost like a young woman's, full of anticipation. I hadn't told my son I was coming. I wanted it to be a surprise. For weeks, I had imagined the joy on his face when he saw me standing at his door. You see, I'm not just any woman. I'm 83 years old, a retired nurse who spent over 50 years caring for other people's children, their mothers, their wounds, and their dying moments. I've seen life from beginning to end, and I know what it means to show up for someone. I thought I had raised a son who understood that. As the taxi drove me from the airport to his apartment in Manhattan, I looked out at the skyscrapers rising like sharp teeth against the winter sky. New York always overwhelmed me, but I was determined to make the trip. I clutched the small gift I had bought him tightly in my lap, a framed photo of his late father, polished silver edges shining, something I knew he'd want close during important milestones in life. What I didn't know then was that the milestone had already come and gone without me. When the driver pulled up, I stepped out carefully, leaning on my cane. My son lived in one of those sleek new apartment buildings with glass windows and smart locks. I walked slowly, my knees stiff, my breath fogging in the chilly February air. And then I saw it. A note taped right to the door. Honeymoon. Do not disturb. I froze, my cane wobbling against the floor. Honeymoon? My head tilted, my eyes reading the words over and over again, but they didn't change. My son was married. Married. And I hadn't even been invited. A cold shock ran down my spine. For a long moment, I just stood there in silence, my heart thudding against my chest like it wanted to escape. I thought perhaps it was a prank. Maybe the note had been left by a neighbor. Maybe it was a joke. But the handwriting, it was hers. I had seen it before on the Christmas card she had sent me once. I knocked. Once. Twice. Louder the third time. The sound of footsteps came from inside. Then, the door opened just a crack before swinging wider. And there she was. My new daughter-in-law. She was everything young women these days liked to flaunt. Glossy brunette hair cascading over her shoulders, expensive silk robe that shimmered in the dim light of the hallway, a faint smell of designer perfume wafting out. She looked like someone who had just stepped out of a magazine cover. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, her lips curling into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "What are you doing here?" I blinked, gripping the railing by the door for support. "What am I doing here?" "I came to see my son. To surprise him. But tell me, what is this? Why wasn't I told? Why wasn't I at my son's wedding?" She tilted her head, her expression almost pitying. Then, with a voice that dripped with condescension, she answered, "Because the ceremony was only for the most important people. I'm sure you understand." The words hit me harder than any physical blow could. The most important people? I had raised that boy on my own after my husband died. I had worked double shifts, sacrificed my health, and buried my own dreams to make sure he had his. I remember the nights I stayed up making him soup when he was sick, the days I sat in the front row at his school plays even when my legs ached from working 12-hour shifts. I remembered holding his hand as he cried when his father passed away, whispering promises that I would always be there for him. And now, I wasn't important enough to be told he was getting married. I stood frozen in the hallway, the humiliation washing over me in waves. My throat tightened, but I refused to cry in front of her. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I see," I whispered, my voice trembling but steady enough. She leaned casually against the doorframe, as if she was guarding some private kingdom that I no longer belonged to. "We really don't want to be disturbed. It's our honeymoon after all." Something inside me broke. But at the same time, something else sparked to life. She thought I was powerless. She thought I was just some old woman, easily dismissed and pushed aside. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I am 83 years old, yes. But weak? No. Forgotten? Never. Because here's what she didn't know. My late husband had been a smart man. When he passed away, he left behind accounts, investments, and properties. Many of them had my name tied to them. My son didn't know the full extent, and certainly not his wife. I had let them live in the comfort of money they thought belonged only to them. But it wasn't. I had the power to turn it off in a heartbeat. And that's when the decision crystallized in my mind, as clear as the winter sky outside. If they wanted to erase me from their lives, then I would remind them just how much I still mattered. I would freeze their bank account. Not tomorrow. Not later. Today. I tightened my grip on the handle of my cane and straightened my back. I didn't say another word to her. Instead, I turned slowly, my heels clicking against the cold tiles of the hallway. "Goodbye, Mrs. Patterson," she called after me, her tone dripping with mock politeness. I didn't answer. I walked away, head high, even though my heart felt like it was crumbling. By the time I reached the elevator, my chest was heavy with grief, but also burning with resolve. They thought they could humiliate me. They thought they could push me aside. But they had underestimated the quiet strength of an old woman who had nothing left to lose. I returned to the small hotel room I had booked just a few blocks away. My fingers trembled as I reached for my handbag, pulling out the old leather folder that held documents my husband had left me years ago. My name was there, plain as day, tied to every major account. My lips pressed into a firm line. They would feel this. I called the bank. My voice was steady as I explained what I wanted. Within the hour, The freeze was in place. And just like that, their paradise began to crumble. I didn't even have to wait long. By evening, my phone started buzzing nonstop. My son's name flashed across the screen, over and over again. I let it ring. I wasn't ready to hear his excuses. Because now, the game had changed. And this time, I wasn't playing to be kind. I was playing to remind them who I was. They thought I was weak. But in just a few hours, I was going to drive them absolutely crazy. My phone started ringing before sunrise. First one call, then another. Then it wouldn't stop. I let it buzz on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling of my small midtown hotel room. The wallpaper had little blue flowers, faded by time. The heater clicked and hummed. Outside, New York woke up with sirens, horns, and footsteps. Inside, my heart beat slow and stubborn, like it had decided to keep going out of pure spite. When the ringing paused, the text came. Mom, pick up. Where are you? What did you do? Cards aren't working. This is insane. Then one from her. This is Sloan. Answer your son. You're embarrassing yourself. I didn't answer. I folded my hands over my chest and took a breath that felt like winter. I let the silence hold me for a minute, just 1 minute, like a blanket I'd earned. Time to introduce myself, I thought. To myself, if no one else. My name is Evelyn Harper Patterson. I'm 83. I'm a blonde, yes, still blonde, even if I get a little help from a box every 6 weeks. I was a nurse for 51 years. I raised my son, Michael, after my husband Robert died. I'm not fancy. I wear soft sweaters, comfortable loafers, and pearl studs Robert gave me on our 30th anniversary. I cook a roast better than I drive on the freeway. I believe in birthdays, thank you notes, and keeping promises. And I came to New York to surprise my son. Instead, I surprised myself. The phone rang again. I let it. When it stopped, a voicemail dropped. I pressed play. Michael's voice burst into the room, fast and hot. Mom, what is going on? My card got declined at the hotel desk. We're checking out and this is humiliating. Can you just answer? Sloane's crying. I'm trying to figure this out and Mom, please, call me back. I closed my eyes. I pictured him at 12, hair sticking up, knees scraped, angry at a bad grade he didn't deserve. I pictured him at 19, crying in my arms after his first breakup. I pictured him last night, locked behind his own door, a sign I will never forget. Honeymoon. Do not disturb. The words wrapped around my heart like wire. I sat up. Enough, I said out loud, to the humming heater, to the faded blue flowers, to myself. If they can lock me out, they can learn how it feels when the door doesn't open. I dressed soft gray slacks, a cream cardigan, a scarf Robert loved because it made my eyes look bright, and brushed my hair until it lay smooth. Then I slipped on my wool coat and stepped into the hall with my cane. The elevator dinged cheerfully, like it had good news. It didn't. Downstairs, the lobby coffee smelled like heaven. I wanted something stronger than courage and softer than anger, so I walked 2 blocks to a corner diner with a neon sign that read Ellie's. The bell over the door chimed. Morning, honey, the waitress said. She was my age, hair in a bun, lipstick a brave red. Her name tag said Gloria. Just coffee. And pancakes, I said. It had been a long time since I'd allowed myself pancakes on a weekday. You got it, Gloria said, like I had asked for forgiveness and she had plenty to give. As I sat by the window, New York walked by in winter coats and hurry. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and tried to steady my mind. I was not cruel. I was not unstable. I was a mother who had been told she wasn't important people. My late husband had set the accounts with both our names. He wanted me safe. He wanted stability for our son, but he also trusted me to know when to hold the line. The bank had already confirmed the freeze last night. Yes, Mrs. Patterson, the manager had said, polite and careful. You're authorized. The hold is immediate. The pancakes arrived golden and kind. I ate slowly. With each bite, the knot in my chest loosened, just a little. The bell over the door chimed again. A wind came in with two people and a storm of perfume. I didn't have to look up to know. Mom. I turned. Michael stood there, tall and red-faced, winter coat open, hair messy like he'd run his hands through it too many times. Behind him, Sloane hugged her coat around her silk dress and scanned the diner like it was a courtroom. She wore sunglasses inside, the kind of touch that says, "Don't look too closely." "May we sit?" Michael asked, voice tight. "It's a free country," I said and moved my purse. They slid into the booth opposite me. Michael didn't reach for my hand. Sloane didn't take off her sunglasses. He started fast. "Mom, the bank, our cards, everything's locked. We couldn't pay the hotel. Do you know how humiliating that was?" They looked at us like we were criminals. "Not criminals," Sloane said, sweet as vinegar. "Just people with a mother who doesn't understand boundaries." I sipped my coffee. "Boundaries," I said softly. "Yes, I know something about those." "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" Michael blurted. His eyes were tired. "You can't just show up like that." "Like a mother?" I asked. "That's not fair," he said. "Neither is honeymoon. Do not disturb." My voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. "Neither is finding out you were married without me by reading a note on a door." Color drained from Michael's face. He looked at the table. "It all happened fast," he muttered. "It was intimate," Sloane said. "Very personal. And we wanted it to be for the most important people." "And I wasn't important," I said. It wasn't a question. Silence fell like a heavy coat. Outside, a bus hissed to stop. Inside, Gloria poured coffee for a man in a navy cap and didn't look our way, the kind of kindness that looks like pretending not to hear. Michael scrubbed a hand over his face. "Mom, can we just fix this? Unfreeze whatever you did. Today. Please." I set down my mug. My hands were steady. I had learned steadiness. In delivery rooms, in trauma bays, at bedsides where people told the truth because there was no time left to lie. "I will," I said. His head jerked up. Hope flashed. Sloane's mouth curled. "With conditions," I finished. Sloane laughed. "Conditions? You can't control us, Evelyn. We're not children." "If you were, I'd put you both in timeout," I said. "But here we are." Michael swallowed. "What conditions?" "Respect," I said simply. "A real ceremony. Family present. A seat for me, front row, with your father's photo on the aisle. An apology for what was done. Not in private. In front of whoever told me I wasn't important. And a clear plan for how we talk to one another going forward." Sloane's sunglasses finally came off. Her eyes were sharp, cold, and hurt. "We're adults. We make our own choices." "You chose to lock me out," I said. "I'm choosing to remind you that doors can lock both ways." Michael's voice broke. "Mom, I love you. I messed up. But you can't hold our lives by the throat like this." I looked at my son. The boy who ate pancakes on Saturday mornings, the teenager who stormed down halls, the man who now hid behind a woman's shrug. "I am not holding your life by the throat," I said. "I am holding up a mirror. Look." He couldn't. Not yet. Gloria appeared with fresh napkins, the universal sign for conversation that needed cushioning. She set them down carefully and looked at me, not them. "How's your coffee, sweetheart?" she asked. "Perfect," I said. "Refill for you?" she offered Michael. "No, thanks," he murmured. "For me," Sloane said. "If it's not burnt." Gloria smiled like she'd been called worse. "You got it." When she left, Sloane leaned in. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know what I've done for Michael. You don't know what our plans are. You don't get to decide anything." I held her gaze. "Then decide this with me. Is there a world where you marry a man and include his mother?" Sloane's jaw worked. She looked away first. Michael stared at his hands. "Mom, can we talk alone?" he asked quietly. "No," Sloane snapped. "We don't keep secrets." "Is that true?" I asked her. "We don't keep secrets? Not even wedding dates." Her cheeks went pink. I slid a folded paper across the table. The bank's letterhead felt heavier than it should. This is the hold confirmation, I said. It's not forever. But it is until we repair what's broken. Michael stared. Where did you even get this power? From your father, I said. He wanted me safe. He wanted us safe. He trusted me to use my judgment. And my judgment says we need to stop and fix what you rushed past. He flinched at rushed. He knew it was true. Sloane scanned the letter. This can't be legal. It is, I said. We can discuss it with the bank together. She slid the paper back like it burned. You're cruel, she whispered. I'm hurt, I said, and my voice finally cracked. And I refuse to be erased. Michael's eyes filled. For a second, the diner blurred, the booths, the neon, the coat rack with someone's red scarf. I blinked, and the world came back. We'll do the ceremony, Michael said suddenly. His voice was raw. We'll do it. We'll make it right. Please, Mom. Sloane whipped her head toward him. What? We will, he repeated softer. Because she's my mother. Something in my chest loosened. A small thing. A thread. Good, I said. Then let's set a date. Sloane shook her head, anger shining like glass. You don't run our calendar. I'm trying to run our family, I said. Gloria reappeared with the check in a little black folder. Take your time, she said, gentle as a hymn. I reached for my purse. Michael's hand shot out. No, let me. He pulled out his card, slid it in, and waited. 10 seconds later, the machine spat it back out with a beep that sounded like a laugh. Declined. His ears went red. He tried another card. Declined. Sloane tried hers. Declined. Gloria didn't blink. Cash is fine, she said like she saw this a dozen times a day. I set 2 20s in the folder and patted it closed. Keep the change, I told Gloria. Bless you, she said, meaning more than breakfast. We stood. Outside, the sidewalk glittered with a thin skin of ice. Michael put a hand under my elbow, habit older than his marriage. Sloane hugged herself and shivered, silk not made for cold. Call the bank, she snapped at Michael. Get them to fix this. We will, he said. To me. Can we meet there? Together? Please. Yes, I said. At 10. We walked in the same direction for a block, 3 people trying not to look like a family. At the corner, I turned right. They went left. A cab splashed through a puddle and soaked a stranger's expensive shoes. He swore, then laughed at himself. Life never stopped to bow to anyone's drama. At the bank, the manager, Mr. Caldwell, gray suit, kind eyes, led us into a glass office. He spoke clearly, slowly. He explained what the accounts were, who had access, who had authority. He explained that a hold was allowed under the terms Robert set years ago, so long as the co-holder, me, requested it in writing, which I had. He explained that no money had been removed, no funds stolen, nothing transferred. The accounts were simply paused until the co-holders agreed. Sloane tried shock, then tears, then a smile that might sell a car in July. None of it moved Mr. Caldwell. Michael asked questions, voice low. Mr. Caldwell answered them. I watched my son's shoulders drop as the truth sank in. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a tantrum. This was structure. This was a line drawn by someone who loved him more than she loved peace. When we left the glass office, the marble floor of the bank looked like a quiet lake. People in wool coats stood in lines. Somewhere, a printer hummed like a polite bee. 10 days, Mr. Caldwell had said before we walked out. Plenty of time to talk and resolve. On the sidewalk, Sloane rounded on me. You want a show? Fine. We'll give you a show. A big, loud, expensive ceremony with you in the front row. And then you'll undo this. I want respect, I said. Not a show. Her mouth flattened. We'll see, she said, which meant I'm not done fighting. We split again. They disappeared into a rideshare they couldn't pay for. I watched the driver ask for cash through a half-rolled window. I watched Sloane throw up her hands. I watched them walk away, arguing in tight, hot circles that left little clouds of breath in the cold air. I bought a small bouquet from a sidewalk stand, white tulips, and carried them back to my hotel. In the elevator, a little girl in a purple coat smiled at me and said she liked my scarf. I told her I liked her bravery.
She didn't know what I meant.
That's all right. In my room, I set the tulips in a water glass and opened my suitcase. Inside, under sweaters, lay the framed photo of Robert the First had planned to give Michael. Robert's smile, frozen in black and white, always steadied me. You would have hated this, I told him. But you would have stood with me. My phone buzzed again. A new text from an unknown number. You don't scare me, old woman. You won't ruin what we have. No name. No courage to sign it. I set the phone down. I wouldn't respond to shadows. Instead, I called the landlord of Michael's building. My name was on the original lease addendum from when he first moved there, back when we both agreed he needed a cosigner. I had never taken my name off. Mrs. Patterson, the landlord said, cautious but polite. What can I do for you? 2 things, I said. First, please remove any guest access codes that were added this week. Second, note my request for an in-person meeting before any new names are added to that lease. Yes, ma'am, he said. Consider it done. I thanked him and hung up. I looked at the tulips. I looked at Robert. I looked at the door. It knocked. I froze. 3 sharp taps, then a pause, then 2 more. The kind of knock that says this is official. I walked to the peephole. 2 men stood there in dark jackets. Behind them, the hotel manager, nervous and trying to look calm. Mrs. Patterson? One of the men called, voice steady. It's the NYPD. We'd like a moment. NYPD. My stomach dipped like an elevator. I opened the door on the chain. Yes. Ma'am, the taller officer said, showing his badge. We received a call about a family dispute involving finances. We just want to make sure everyone is safe and understands this might be a civil matter. May we come in to talk? Behind them, the hotel manager gave me a tiny nod like they're real. Before I could answer, a voice carried up the hall, too loud, too bright. Officers. Over here.
Sloan.
She stepped into view in a camel coat, hair perfect, eyes shining with a kind of triumph that made my skin go cold. Michael trailed her, pale and worried, a folded paper in his hand. And behind them, stepping out of the elevator like a ghost with a briefcase, came a man I hadn't seen in years, Robert's attorney, Mr. Adler. His silver hair was neat. His face was unreadable. He held a worn, brown folder with my husband's initials pressed into the leather. Mrs. Patterson, the taller officer said again, gentle but firm. We need to talk about the accounts and about a clause in your late husband's trust Mr. Adler says we should all hear. Mr. Adler lifted the folder and met my eyes. Evelyn, he said softly, the way you say someone's name before you tell them the truth. There's something we need to discuss.
Now.
I unhooked the chain and opened the door. Mrs. Patterson? One of the men called, voice steady. It's the NYPD. We'd like a moment. NYPD. My stomach dipped like an elevator. I opened the door on the chain. Yes. Ma'am, the taller officer said, showing his badge. We received a call about a family dispute involving finances. We just want to make sure everyone is safe and understands this might be a civil matter. May we come in to talk? Behind them, the hotel manager gave me a tiny nod like they're real. Before I could answer, a voice carried up the hall, too loud, too bright. Officers. Over here.
Sloan.
She stepped into view in a camel coat, hair perfect, eyes shining with a kind of triumph that made my skin go cold. Michael trailed her, pale and worried, a folded paper in his hand. And behind them, stepping out of the elevator like a ghost with a briefcase, came a man I hadn't seen in years, Robert's attorney, Mr. Adler. His silver hair was neat. His face was unreadable. He held a worn, brown folder with my husband's initials pressed into the leather. Mrs. Patterson, the taller officer said again, gentle but firm. We need to talk about the accounts and about a clause in your late husband's trust Mr. Adler says we should all hear. Mr. Adler lifted the folder and met my eyes. Evelyn, he said softly, The way you say someone's name before you tell them the truth. There's something we need to discuss.
Now.
I unhooked the chain and opened the door. The moment that door clicked open, it felt as if the air itself had shifted. The officers stepped inside first, polite, steady, their heavy boots muffling against the carpet. Mr. Adler followed, placing his leather folder carefully on the desk by the window, like it carried something too heavy to be trusted in anyone's arms. Michael trailed behind him, his head low, and then Sloane, heels clicking, perfume cutting through the musty hotel air, eyes glinting like victory was already hers. I stood there with my cane planted firmly by my side. 83? Yes, but not fragile. Not broken. Ma'am, the taller officer said again, we're not here to accuse you of anything criminal. This was reported as a financial dispute, but it looks like a civil matter. Still, we'd like everyone to sit and clarify what's going on. Of course, I said, gesturing toward the chairs. My voice was calm, even though my heart was drumming in my chest. We sat. Michael on one side, shifting in his seat like a boy waiting for a scolding. Sloane beside him, back straight, lips pursed in that smile that wasn't a smile at all. Mr. Adler across from me, folding his hands over the brown folder. The officers stood by the door, watchful but relaxed. Let's start simple, one officer said. Mrs. Patterson, did you request a freeze on the accounts in question? Yes, I said plainly. And are you authorized to do so? I nodded toward Mr. Adler. He can answer that better than I. All eyes turned to him. Slowly, with the patience of a man who had spent his life reading papers that decided fates, Mr. Adler opened the folder. Inside were documents older than Sloane's marriage vows. Older, perhaps, than Sloane herself. Robert Patterson set up these accounts years before he passed, Adler explained. Joint authority was granted to both his wife, Evelyn, and his son, Michael. Either could request holds or releases. Evelyn acted within her rights. Legally, nothing improper has occurred. Sloane bristled. So, she can just pull the rug out from under us? Just like that? That's absurd. Adler's eyes cut to her, cool and sharp. Absurd or not, it is binding. Michael rubbed his temples. Mom, please. You've made your point. But this isn't just money. The hotel, the bills, we can't even buy food right now. And I wasn't invited to your wedding, I said softly. He flinched. My words were quiet, but they landed like stones. The younger officer cleared his throat. Maybe we should focus on solutions rather than past events. Yes, Adler agreed. His voice carried a weight that made even Sloane lean back. Because this isn't the whole picture. Robert included a stipulation in his trust. A clause neither of you seemed to know about. He pulled out a single page, the paper yellowed at the edges, the ink neat and deliberate. He adjusted his glasses and read. In the event my wife, Evelyn Harper Patterson, deems herself disrespected or excluded by our descendants, she reserves the right to suspend access to joint assets until such time as reconciliation has been made. My judgment in this matter lies with her. This clause is binding and not subject to challenge. The room went silent. Even the city noise outside seemed to pause. I felt my throat tighten. Robert, my Robert, had written those words. Years ago, after we'd argued late into the night about family, about loyalty, about how easy it was for the young to forget the old. He had looked me in the eye then and said, if they ever treat you like you don't matter, I'll make sure they remember you do. And now here we were. Sloane's face drained of color. That's ridiculous. He couldn't have. He did. Adler interrupted firmly. I drafted this myself. Your husband signed it with full clarity. A witness notarized it. It's ironclad. Michael leaned back, his face pale. His lips trembled, but no words came out. I turned to Sloane, meeting her glare head-on. You told me the ceremony was for the most important people. Your husband thought otherwise. He made sure I could remind you what important means. Her mouth opened and shut, no sound escaping. For once, her confidence cracked. One of the officers shifted. So, this is less a police matter and more a family one. Unless anyone here alleges fraud or theft, we have no grounds to intervene. No fraud, Adler confirmed. Everything is legal. The officers nodded. Then we'll leave you to it. But folks, he looked around at all of us. Sometimes money's not the thing that needs fixing. When they left, the room felt smaller. The hum of the heater grew louder, the walls closer. Michael finally spoke, voice low and broken.
Mom.
I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought keeping it small was easier. Sloane said it would be intimate. I thought you'd understand. Understand. My voice cracked. Michael, I held your hand when you were born. I worked double shifts to keep food on the table. I buried your father and carried both our grief so you could keep moving. And you thought I would understand being erased. He covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. Sloane touched his arm, her voice icy. Don't let her guilt trip you, Michael. This is manipulation. She's using money to control us. I leaned forward, steady.
No.
I'm using love to remind him who I am. Money is just the language your husband left behind to make sure I was heard. Sloane's eyes narrowed. You won't win. This isn't a war, I said softly. It's a family. But even as I spoke, I knew it was both. Adler gathered the papers, sliding them neatly back into the folder. Evelyn, the hold can remain as long as you see fit. But remember, time is a weapon too. Decide how long you want this lesson to last. I nodded. My cane tapped lightly against the carpet. Thank you, Mr. Adler. He stood, tipped his head respectfully, and left. That left me with Michael and Sloane. He stared at the floor. She stared at me, her eyes burning with a hatred she didn't bother to hide anymore. You think you've won because you froze a few accounts? She hissed. You have no idea what I can do. My hand tightened on the cane. Then show me. But remember, every choice has a cost. And right now, the check is coming to your table. Her lips curled, but she said nothing more. She yanked Michael to his feet, and together they stormed out of the room. I sat there, alone again, the tulips wilting slightly in the glass by the window. My chest ached, but my spine stayed straight. Robert's words echoed in my ears. She reserves the right. I looked at his photo, propped up on the desk. They'll learn, Robert, I whispered. One way or another, they'll learn. And then my phone buzzed again. A new message. Not from Michael. Not from Sloane. From a number I didn't recognize. You've started something you can't finish, Evelyn. Step back, or you'll regret it. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't just about family anymore. Someone else was pulling strings. And I had no idea who. The message sat on my screen like a loaded gun. You've started something you can't finish, Evelyn. Step back, or you'll regret it. I read it twice. Then a third time. My fingers trembled as I set the phone down on the desk, right next to Robert's framed photo. His smile, captured all those years ago, looked calm, strong, reassuring. I tried to borrow that strength now, but my stomach twisted with unease. Who would send me such a thing? Michael wouldn't. For all his failings, for all the ways he had let Sloane dictate his choices, my son wasn't cruel. And Sloane, well, I wouldn't put it past her to spit venom, but she had been too busy storming out of this very room minutes ago to send such a calculated threat.
No.
This was someone else. Someone who knew enough about my actions to feel threatened by them. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, my cane resting across my lap, and tried to steady my thoughts. 83 years had given me many lessons: how to stay calm in a crisis, how to listen between the lines of what people said, how to recognize when fear was being used as a weapon. This text wasn't just a warning. It was a message meant to rattle me, to push me back into silence. And I wasn't about to let it work. Still, I couldn't ignore the cold knot forming at the base of my spine. I scrolled back through the messages. Sloane's sharp words. Michael's pleas. And now this anonymous threat. 3 different voices, all trying to pull me in different directions. For a moment, I felt the weight of it all pressing down, the loneliness of being an old woman standing against a storm much larger than herself. I reached for the tulips on the desk, brushing my fingers against their soft petals. They were already starting to bend, their stems weary from standing too long in too little water. Like me, they had been through enough. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Last chance. Release the accounts. Walk away quietly, or you won't like what happens next. I inhaled sharply. Whoever this was, they weren't bluffing. At least, they wanted me to believe they weren't. I pressed the phone against my chest and closed my eyes. Robert, if you can hear me, give me strength.
A knock startled me.
Mrs. Patterson? A voice on the other side of the door. The hotel manager again, nervous and careful. There's someone here asking to see you. Should I send them up? My breath caught. Who is it? An older gentleman. Says he knew your husband. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the cane. Could it be one of Robert's old colleagues? A friend? Or someone connected to these threats? Send him up, I said finally, my voice steady. But keep the front desk on alert. Moments later, the door opened, and there he was, a man I hadn't seen in decades. Evelyn, he said, his voice gravelly but warm. It's been a long time. I blinked. Harold Whitman? He nodded. Robert's business partner, from years ago. I remembered him at our kitchen table once, back when Michael was a boy. A man with sharp eyes and a handshake that lingered just a little too long. What are you doing here? I asked carefully. He stepped inside, his coat heavy with winter air. I heard about what you did with the accounts. Word travels fast when money's involved. I frowned. And how exactly did you hear? He smiled thinly. Let's just say your son and his bride aren't the only ones who had plans for that money. And now, thanks to you, things are complicated. My pulse quickened. So it was you? I said, my voice low. You sent those messages. He didn't deny it. Instead, he lowered himself into the chair by the desk, his eyes glinting. Evelyn, you're playing a dangerous game. That money isn't just sitting there. Deals were in motion. Investments. Promises made. You've frozen more than just a honeymoon budget. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just about Michael and Sloane. This was bigger. Robert never told me. I began. Robert told you enough, Harold interrupted. Enough to know that sometimes silence is safer.
But now?
You've stirred the pot. People don't like their plans interrupted, Evelyn. And some of them aren't as patient as I am. I gripped my cane so tightly my knuckles whitened. What exactly are you saying, Harold? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'm saying release the accounts. Do it before someone else decides to make an example of you. You're 83. Do you really want your last years spent fighting battles you can't win? I stared at him, my heart pounding. For a moment, fear threatened to take hold. But then I remembered Sloane's smirk at the door, Michael's bowed head at the diner, Robert's words in that trust document. They had already erased me once. If I stepped back now, I'd be erased forever. I stood slowly, my cane tapping against the floor. Harold, let me be clear. I will not release those accounts until my family remembers who I am. If that complicates your so-called plans, that's your problem, not mine. His jaw tightened. Evelyn, you don't know who you're crossing. And you, I said, my voice firm, don't know who raised me. My mother used to scrub floors until her hands bled, and she still held her head high. I nursed soldiers who screamed in pain and mothers who begged God for mercy. I buried my husband and kept his promises alive. So don't you dare stand in front of me and tell me what battles I can or cannot fight. The room went still. Harold's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. After a long moment, he stood, buttoning his coat. This isn't over, he said. No, I replied. It isn't. He left, his footsteps echoing down the hall. I sank back into the chair, my chest heaving. Fear still lingered, sharp and bitter. But beneath it was something else, steel. They thought they could push me aside. They thought I was too old, too weak, too irrelevant. They were wrong. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. When the line connected, a familiar voice answered. Evelyn? My goodness, it's been ages. Hello, Martha, I said softly. Martha Reynolds, my oldest friend, retired attorney, sharp as ever. I need your help. It seems Robert left me more power than I realized. And I think it's time I used it. She paused. What's going on? I looked at Robert's photo, at the threatening messages still glowing on my phone, at the tulips beginning to wilt. Let's just say, I whispered, I've decided not to go quietly. And just as I hung up, another message flashed on the screen. You've made your choice. Now you'll see the consequences. My hand went cold. My heart pounded. Because this time, the message wasn't just a threat. It came with a photo attached, blurry but unmistakable. Michael, standing outside the bank, with two men I didn't recognize. And one of them had his hand on my son's shoulder. When I saw that photo, my heart nearly stopped. Michael, my son, standing outside the bank with two strangers I didn't recognize. The image was grainy, likely taken from a distance, but it was clear enough to chill me. One of the men had his hand gripping Michael's shoulder, not friendly, not casual, possessive, controlling. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. My cane leaned against the arm of the chair, forgotten, while my hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped the phone.
Who were those men?
Why were they with my son? And why send me this picture now, after all the threats? The answer was obvious. It was a message. They were letting me know they could get to Michael. That if I didn't comply, if I didn't release the accounts, he would pay the price. But here's what they didn't understand. Michael may have broken my heart. He may have let Sloan shut me out of his life. But he was still my son. Still the boy I had raised through scraped knees and heartbreak. And no one was going to hurt him while I still drew breath. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth, like I had taught my patience when panic set in. I needed clarity. Panic wouldn't save him. Robert's words in that trust document came back to me. She reserves the right. He had trusted me with this power. And now I had to use it, not just for respect, but for protection. The phone rang again. My old friend Martha. Evelyn. Her voice was sharp, quick, like she had sensed the urgency even before I spoke.
Yes.
I'm here. What's happened? I swallowed hard. It's Michael. They've sent me a photo. Two men are with him. I don't know who they are, but I know it's meant to scare me. There was a pause. Then Martha's tone hardened. Listen to me carefully. You cannot back down.
Not now.
That clause Robert left you, it's ironclad. Which means those men don't have a legal path to what they want. That's why they're resorting to threats. Fear is their weapon. You, Evelyn, must use resolve as yours. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the rapid drum of my heart. But what if Michael? He's a grown man, she cut me off. But you're still his mother. Use that. Do not let them think they can scare you into surrender. I took a shaky breath. Martha, I don't know if I'm strong enough. Her voice softened, but only slightly. Evelyn, you've survived more than most. You've buried a husband, raised a son alone, cared for strangers in their darkest hours. You are stronger than you realize. These men think 83 years makes you weak. Prove them wrong. Tears stung my eyes. Robert always said I had more fight in me than I showed. He was right, Martha said firmly. Now listen. Document everything. Every message. Every call. If they escalate, we'll involve law enforcement, not just the local police. Financial crimes are federal territory. Do you understand? Yes, I whispered.
Good.
And Evelyn. Yes. You are not alone. I'll be on the next train to New York. Hold steady until I arrive. I clutched the phone to my ear, my eyes falling on Robert's photo again. Thank you, Martha. When I hung up, I felt steadier. Not whole, not fearless, but steadier. I picked up my phone again and stared at the photo of Michael with those strangers. I enlarged it, studying their faces. One had a scar across his cheek. The other wore a dark cap pulled low. Both radiated the kind of cold calculation you only saw in people who lived off intimidation. And Michael, my boy, I looked lost. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Tick-tock, Evelyn. Every hour you hold out, your son pays. I gritted my teeth, my hand tightening around the cane until the wood creaked. They thought they could break me with fear. They thought they could use Michael as leverage. But they didn't understand. I had nothing left to lose but him. And if they forced me into a corner, they would find out just how dangerous an old woman could be. I stood, slowly, my knees aching, my back stiff. But my resolve was iron. Not today, I whispered to the empty room. You will not win today. I packed my bag with deliberate movements, documents, Robert's photo, the bank confirmation papers, my phone charger. Then I slipped on my wool coat and tied my scarf tight. I wasn't going to sit in this hotel room waiting for the next threat. I was going to face them head-on. But just as I reached for the door, another knock startled me.
Sharp.
Urgent. I froze, my hand hovering over the handle. Mrs. Patterson? A muffled voice.
Male.
Unfamiliar. We need to talk. About your son. I tightened my grip on the cane. Was it the men from the photo? Another threat? Or someone who actually wanted to help? Slowly, I reached for the peephole. And what I saw on the other side made my blood run cold. It wasn't Michael. It wasn't Sloan. It wasn't Harold. It was the man with the scar from the photo, standing right outside my door. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, two more figures lingered in the hallway, their faces shadowed, their posture unmistakable. Predators. My chest tightened. My fingers shook on the cane. They had found me. The knock came again, harder this time. Mrs. Patterson, the scarred man's voice called, smoother now, almost polite. We don't want trouble. We just want to talk. My heart hammered so loud I was sure they could hear it through the door. My fingers trembled against the cane, but I tightened my grip until the shaking steadied. I wasn't about to let them see me rattled. I looked once more through the peephole. The scarred man stood close, his lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, the other two shifted impatiently. Predators pacing, waiting for the signal.
Talk.
I whispered to myself. Men like you don't come to talk. My mind raced. I was 83, standing in a hotel room with nothing but a cane, a phone, and a lifetime of stubbornness. Against three men who could knock this door down in seconds. But age has its advantages. I'd learned patience. I'd learned observation. And most importantly, I'd learned that people who rely on fear often crumble when they realize it won't work. I slipped my phone into my pocket, set it to record, and then quietly dialed the front desk. When the receptionist answered in a whisper, I said only 2 words, send security. Then I hung up. The scarred man knocked once more. Evelyn, he said, voice firm now. We know you're in there. Don't make this difficult. I drew a breath, straightened my back, and unlatched the chain. But I didn't open wide. I cracked the door just an inch, enough for my voice to slip through, but not enough for them to force their way in easily. What do you want? I asked, my voice steady, though my heart raced. The man leaned closer, his scar catching the hallway light.
Simple.
Release the accounts. Undo what you've done, and all of this goes away. All of what? I asked sharply. His smile widened. The stress. The family conflict. The misunderstandings. Nobody has to get hurt. Behind him, one of the men chuckled under his breath. The sound made my skin crawl. I won't be bullied, I said. His expression shifted, the charm vanishing. This isn't bullying. It's reality. You're 83. You don't need this fight. Just step aside and let the younger generation handle things. I met his gaze through the crack in the door. The younger generation has forgotten who built the ground they walk on. I won't step aside. For a moment, silence. Then his voice dropped low. If you care about your son, you'll reconsider. My blood went cold. What have you done with Michael? Nothing yet, he said smoothly. But accidents happen in this city.
People slip.
People disappear. It would be a shame if. Enough, I snapped, louder than I expected. My voice echoed off the narrow hallway. For the first time, his smile faltered. Get away from my door, I said, steel in my tone. Or you'll regret it. The man tilted his head, amused. And what exactly are you going to do, Grandma? Hit me with your cane. I lifted the cane higher, letting the tip tap against the doorframe so it echoed. This cane has walked me through war protests, hospital wards, and funeral processions. If it needs to knock sense into men who think they can scare me, it will. The men laughed, but not for long. Down the hall, the elevator dinged, and heavy footsteps thundered closer. 2 hotel security officers appeared, stocky and serious, their radios crackling. "Problem here?" one of them asked. The scarred man straightened, the humor draining from his face. "No problem," he said quickly. "We were just leaving." He shot me one last look, dark and simmering, then turned sharply. The others followed, disappearing down the hall. I closed the door, my hands shaking, and leaned heavily against it. Relief flooded through me, but it was fleeting. Because I knew men like that didn't just walk away. They'd be back. And next time, maybe without warning. I sat at the desk, pulled Robert's photo close, and whispered, "They're circling Robert. They're circling us both." My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from Michael. "Mom, I don't know what's happening, but these men won't leave me alone. Please, help me." Tears burned my eyes, but my jaw set firm. They wanted me afraid. They wanted me to surrender. But instead, they'd just given me the one thing they should never have, a reason to fight harder. I picked up the phone, dialed Martha, and when she answered, my voice was sharp and clear. "Martha, it's time. I need everything you've got, law, connections, all of it. Because they've just threatened my son. And I'm not letting this end the way they think."
"Good," she said.
"I'll be there in 2 hours. Hold on, Evelyn. Hold on." I hung up, looked once more at Robert's face in the frame, and whispered, "They think they can scare me. But they've forgotten. I've lived longer than their threats. And I know how to win a war without lifting a fist." I stood, my cane firm in my hand, my reflection in the mirror straight and unyielding. But as I turned away, the phone buzzed again. This time, not a message. A video. My son, tied to a chair, his face bruised, and a voice behind the camera saying, "Your move, Evelyn." The video froze me to the spot. Michael's face, swollen, bruised, terrified, flickered on the small screen of my phone. He was tied to a chair in what looked like some dingy basement, a single light bulb swinging above him, casting cruel shadows. "Your move, Evelyn," the voice behind the camera said. Then the video cut to black. For a moment, the world tilted. My knees buckled, and I had to grip the desk just to keep myself standing.
My boy.
My only son. No matter how old he was, no matter how badly he had failed me, the sight of him like that tore through my chest like a knife. I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered, "Oh, Robert, they have him. They have our boy." The room blurred with tears, but I forced myself to wipe them away. I couldn't afford to crumble.
Not now.
Not when Michael's life depended on me. The phone buzzed again. A message. "You have 12 hours. Lift the freeze. Or he doesn't walk out." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. 12 hours. That was all the time I had. I picked up my cane and paced the room, every step heavy with the weight of the decision before me. If I released the accounts, I would be giving in. Robert's protection, his final safeguard, would be gone. Everything he had trusted me to defend would vanish into the hands of men like Harold and these faceless predators. But if I didn't, Michael could die. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the hotel window, looking out at the city lights glittering below. So many windows, so many lives. And here I was, 83 years old, asked to play a game against wolves who thought I was too weak to fight. But they had underestimated me. They always did. I sat back at the desk and dialed Martha again. She answered on the first ring. "Evelyn." "They have Michael," I said, my voice trembling but steady enough. "They sent me a video. He's tied up. Hurt. They've given me 12 hours. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Where is he?" "I don't know," I whispered. The video was dark. A basement, maybe. One light bulb. Concrete walls. Nothing more. Martha was silent for a moment, and then her voice hardened. All right. Listen carefully. Do not respond to them yet. Buy yourself time. I'll call in favors. Former colleagues, investigators, people who can trace the video, track where it came from. We'll find him. My fingers clutched the phone tighter. Martha, what if we don't? Then we fight harder, she said firmly. But Evelyn, you cannot give them what they want. If you release the accounts, you won't just lose Robert's legacy. You'll empower them. They'll take Michael anyway, because then you'll have nothing left to bargain with. Do you understand? The truth of her words sank deep. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. These men weren't honorable. They weren't making an exchange. They were making a statement that they could take whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. I understand, I said quietly.
Good.
I'm on my way. Hold strong. You've survived too much to let them win now. I hung up and stared at Robert's photo again. His calm, steady smile seemed to anchor me. I remembered the night we signed those papers, how he had insisted on that clause in the trust. Someday, Evelyn, he had said, they might try to push you aside. You'll think you're too tired to fight. But when that day comes, you'll surprise even yourself. And them. Well, Robert, I whispered, that day has come. Hours crawled by like years. The hotel room felt smaller and smaller, the ticking clock louder and louder. At one point, I found myself remembering Michael as a boy, running barefoot through the backyard, laughing as he chased fireflies. I remembered the way he used to curl up beside me on the couch during storms, whispering, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll protect you." Now it was my turn to protect him.
The phone buzzed again.
Another video. This time, Michael spoke. His voice cracked, broken. "Mom, please.
Do what they say."
"I can't." His words cut off with a cry as someone struck him. Then silence. I pressed the phone to my chest and let out a sob that shook me to the core. But when I lifted my head again, the tears were gone. Only fire remained. I pulled out a notepad from the desk and began writing every message, every detail I had noticed in the video. The faint hum in the background, the sound of dripping water, the way the light bulb swayed as if there was a draft. Clues, small but important. A knock at the door startled me. Evelyn. Martha's voice. I hurried to open it. There she was, my oldest friend, her silver hair pulled back, her briefcase clutched firmly. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "Show me everything," she said briskly. I handed her the phone. She watched the videos, her jaw tightening, her eyes narrowing. "We'll find him," she muttered. "But we need to move fast." She pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "I'm forwarding this to a contact in cybercrimes. If they can trace the IP address of where these were sent from, we might get a location." I sat beside her, my hands folded tightly, praying silently. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then her laptop dinged. She leaned closer, her eyes scanning. "They traced it," she whispered. "Where?" I breathed. She turned the screen to me. A location popped up. Not far. An old warehouse on the outskirts of the city. My heart lurched. "Michael." Martha grabbed my hand. "Evelyn, listen. We're not going alone. We'll take this to the police. But you have to be ready for anything. These men aren't bluffing." I nodded, my grip on the cane tightening. "I've been ready for 83 years, Martha." We gathered our things. Martha made the call. And within minutes, we were on our way, sirens wailing in the distance as the police converged on the warehouse. But as we approached, my phone buzzed one last time. A new message. "Too late. We're moving him." My breath caught. My knees went weak. They knew. They were always one step ahead. The message burned on my screen like fire. "Too late. We're moving him." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My knees wobbled, and I clutched Martha's arm just to steady myself. "They know," I whispered. "They're watching us." Martha's jaw tightened. "Then we have to outthink them." "Evelyn, don't panic now." Panic is exactly what they want. But it was impossible not to feel it. My son was being moved like some pawn on a chessboard, and every second that ticked by felt like sand slipping through an hourglass. We were already in the police cruiser, sirens echoing against the city skyscrapers as we barreled toward the warehouse district. The officers, two young men with steady eyes and clipped words, spoke into their radios, calling for backup. "Ma'am," the taller one said, glancing back at me, "whoever's behind this knows what they're doing. But I promise we won't stop until we find your son." I nodded weakly, gripping Robert's photo in my lap like it was a shield. The cruiser screeched to a halt outside the warehouse. It was just as the trace had suggested, an old brick building, windows shattered, graffiti streaked across its walls. A faint light flickered inside, like a dying flame. The officers moved fast, weapons drawn, their radios crackling as backup swarmed the area. Martha and I stayed behind the barricade of police cars, my cane planted firmly in the cold ground. The door of the warehouse was kicked in. Shouts echoed. Flashlights cut through the darkness. And then, silence. For a few heartbeats, the night held its breath. Then an officer emerged, his face grim. "Empty," he called. "They're gone." My heart dropped into my stomach. "They were here," another officer said, holding up ropes cut clean, still warm to the touch. "Not long ago. 10, maybe 15 minutes." I closed my eyes, swaying. Martha grabbed my arm. "Evelyn, hold on. This isn't the end. It just means they're moving faster. We'll move faster too." But even as she spoke, my phone buzzed again. I lifted it with trembling hands. Another video. Michael again, this time in the back of a van, blindfolded, his head resting limply against the metal wall. A voice spoke over the recording. "You're running out of time, Evelyn. One last chance. Meet us at Pier 47 midnight. Come alone. Release the accounts or say goodbye." The video cut off. My chest ached as though someone had driven a fist straight into it. Midnight. Just hours away. Martha's voice was sharp. "It's a trap." "I know," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "But I'm going." Martha's eyes widened. "Evelyn." "No," I interrupted. "Listen. They won't let him go otherwise. They want me, Martha. Me and the accounts. That's their leverage. And if I don't go, they'll kill him." She shook her head. "Then at least let the police set it up properly. Surveillance, undercover units." I looked at her, tears stinging my eyes. "Martha, I don't have time for setups. They'll be watching. If they even sense police nearby, they'll disappear with him forever." She grabbed my hand. "And what about you? You think they'll let you walk away?" I smiled faintly, though my heart was heavy. "Martha, I'm 83 years old. I've lived a long life. I buried Robert. I raised Michael. If this is the fight I was meant to finish, then so be it. But if I can save my son, it will be worth it." Her hand tightened around mine. "You stubborn, impossible woman," she whispered, her eyes wet. "I learned from the best," I said softly. "You taught me half my stubbornness." Midnight came too quickly. The city streets were eerily quiet as I made my way to Pier 47, my cane tapping against the weathered boards of the dock. The air was sharp with salt and cold, the waves lapping against the wooden posts like a heartbeat. A van idled near the end of the pier. Its headlights cut through the darkness, blinding me for a moment. "Evelyn," a voice called. The scarred man stepped out, his smile cruel under the moonlight. "I knew you'd come." My phone buzzed in my pocket. Martha's last words before I left echoed in my ear. "Record everything. And don't underestimate your power." I lifted my chin. "Where's my son?" The scarred man gestured, and the van door slid open. Inside, Michael sat slumped, hands bound, a gag over his mouth. His eyes met mine, wide, desperate. "You know the deal," the man said. "Release the accounts. Right here. Right now. And you walk away with your boy." My fingers trembled as I pulled the bank documents from my bag. The scarred man's eyes lit up. But before I handed them over, I spoke. My voice rang clear in the night air. "You think I'm afraid because I'm old. You think my age makes me weak. But let me tell you something. I've lived through more storms than you can count. I've seen wars, I've seen loss, I've seen death. And I survived them all. Do you really think you can scare me with threats? The man's smile faltered, just slightly. You want the accounts? I said, holding the papers higher. Then listen carefully. The money doesn't just belong to you, or to me. It belongs to the legacy Robert built. And if you destroy it, you destroy everything he stood for. Is that what you want? His eyes narrowed. Enough speeches, Grandma. Hand it over. I took a slow step forward. My cane tapped against a pier, the sound echoing like a drumbeat. Let my son go first, I said firmly.
Now.
For a long, tense moment, silence hung between us. The waves lapped. The van engine idled. Michael's muffled cry carried in the air. Finally, the scarred man nodded. Untie him, he ordered one of his men. Michael stumbled out of the van, collapsing against me. I wrapped one arm around him, my cane in the other hand, holding him upright. The scarred man reached for the papers.
Now.
I looked him straight in the eye. You want them? Then you'll take them from my hands. And just as he reached out, floodlights exploded across the pier. Sirens wailed. Dozens of officers surged from the shadows, weapons raised. Drop it, a voice boomed. The scarred man froze, his eyes darting in rage. I smiled faintly. You didn't think I'd come alone, did you? Because while I had argued against the police earlier, Martha hadn't listened. She had set it up anyway. Silent units, hidden just far enough away not to scare them off. Until now. Chaos erupted. The men scrambled. Officers tackled them. Shouts echoed through the night. And through it all, I held my son tight, his head buried against my shoulder, my cane planted firmly, like a flag in the storm. When it was over, the scarred man and his crew were dragged away in handcuffs, their curses lost in the wail of sirens. Michael clung to me, trembling. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered through broken sobs. I should have never let them. I stroked his hair gently.
Sure.
You're safe now. That's all that matters. As dawn broke over the water, I stood there with my son, the pier bathed in golden light. I had faced down wolves, stared fear in the eye, and won. Not because I was young. Not because I was strong. But because I was Evelyn Harper Patterson, an old woman who refused to be erased.